calling Plenary Session 1. And in this session, we are going to talk a lot about different things जिसके बारे में शायद हमने सोचा नहीं था, but this is a time we are going to explore the new horizons. So, my dear friends, we are going to talk about driving forces of change, striving for an equal future from a gender lens. So the panelists over here, they have got that gender lens. Let us see what they see through that lens. So my dear friends, let me introduce you to the panelists. We are having over here the Chairperson and CEO of Salesforce India, Ms. Arundhati Bhattacharya. Welcome. We also have MD Modi Enterprises, Mr. Samir Modi. Welcome. We have with us SVP and MD SAP Labs India, Ms. Sindhu Gangadharan. Welcome to you again. And MD and CEO Bombay Stock Exchange, Mr. Ashishkumar Chauhan. Welcome to all of you. And now, let me please introduce the person who will be having the training stick in the hand and who will be going to juggle with all these panelists. My dear friends, the moderator of this session is going to be Ester Martinez, and she's the CEO and Editor-in-Chief at People Matters. And yes, where people matters, genders do, because we are talking about a gender-neutral society. So, my dear friends, now I'm handing over to the moderator, Ester Martinez. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. Thank you so much. And a very warm welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from.
Exactly.
Thank you, Shilpa, for the introduction. And we have lots of things we want to cover today. I think when we're looking at the gender lens, we're really always looking at the corporates to be a very important stakeholder in this change. And one of the things that we've learned is that the commitment from corporates really need to translate into outcomes. And we're going to be covering a lot of those things today. But before I do that, I want to quickly just give a little overview of our panelists, and all of them need no introduction. But just to kind of welcome them formally, we have Ms. Arundhati, as you said, Chairman, CEO Salesforce, also the former Chairman of State Bank of India, and the first woman to be the Chairman of the bank. So very warm welcome, Arundhati. How are you feeling this morning?
Great, thank you so much.
Let's see if I say it right. Soch batlo kut ko batlo dunia batlo.
Pretty good, Esther. Pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah, pretty good.
Very warm welcome. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling very good, very excited to be on this panel.
Thank you. He's also the board member of Qualtrics and Titan, and as well as the Executive Council member of NASSCOM and member of the Indo-German Steering Committee. A very warm welcome, Sindhu.
Thank you so much, Esther. It's an honor to share the stage with Arundhati, Samir, and Ashish today. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much. We'll look forward to learning a lot of things from you as well. Joining as well, Ashish Chauhan, MD, CEO of Bombay Stock Exchange. He's worked as the CEO of the Bombay Stock Exchange. And prior to that, he was also he was the Chief Information Officer at Reliance, also Head of Communication and CEO of the Mumbai Indians. So very warm welcome, Ashish.
Thank you, ma'am.
Great. So we have a lot of things to cover today. And what we're going to do, we've decided as a group that we're going to cover one main pillar each. And we're going to try to make this conversation fluid. So you're inviting you to use the chat as well to give us energy. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from. So just let us know your name and which city you're joining us from. We can see the diversity, a lot of things. So I'm going to get started with the first question, Samir, on really this gender equation has been a challenge. Now we have a new context, which is called the pandemic context. So now the post-pandemic context, I don't know whether we're still in the middle of it or in the post-pandemic, but the context have changed. So when you look at this new context and you look at it from the gender lens, what are some of the additional barriers that have been added? Some of the additional problems we'll have to overcome, but also what are some of the silver linings that this pandemic...
Balance, silver lining challenges. I'm going to try my best to answer a few of them. I think 2020 has been a very big eye-opener for all of us as individuals, businesses, communities, and it's created massive disruptions and it changed the world order as we knew it. From a gender equation perspective, the world has witnessed how working women have struggled in managing a career along with responsibilities at home. According to the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, data shows that far fewer women who lost their work during the lockdown were able to come back to work. In fact, after lifting of the lockdown in August, 40% of women employed in December were still employed versus 88% of men. Even during the pandemic, there was increased violence by many fold. There was a significant increase in unpaid care and domestic work, apart from mental and physical health related issues. I think the silver lining has been that the leaders recognize the significance of empathizing and embracing change with panache and dignity. We saw a paradigm shift on how leaders made business strategies. Business continuity was important, but prioritizing people was more important than the business per se. And this showed that the corporates are consciously working towards creating a more supportive and inclusive environment. And I think the work from home, which is still evolving, has put additional pressure on people management, especially with women. And I think that organizations are now, especially our organization, is now seeing how do we make inclusion, how do we change the scenario of when to come to work, how to come to work, what needs to be done to manage the home as well as manage the office. And this is addressing socioeconomic inequalities in our society, hiring courageous leaders, breaking down silos, and raising questions and listening are some of the things that we are working as an organization. I think most organizations will need to work like this. Like you said, soch badlo, khud ko badlo, dunya badlo. It's a concept that I live in. That change yourself, change your thinking, change yourself, change the world. And I think that is what's needed as a silver lining that's come about, is that leaders thinking differently. They are more empathetic, more passionate, more people-oriented than ever before.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Samir. Thanks for sharing that. And I think the setting the tone of the opportunity of reimagine the workplace, and how do we then rebuild that workplace with the inclusiveness as the center stage for everyone in the organization. So, Sindhu, I'm coming to you on the next step. I think from the commitment and vision perspective, as Samir was saying, there is, many business leaders and professional CEOs would agree that that's, what the movement from society perspective, and that's really what we have to contribute. But we have seen some lessons from the past on how we've been able to really move those commitments into outcomes. And, some of us have been more successful, some of us may not have been so successful, but definitely there is an opportunity to do way better. So what are some of those lessons learned from your experience to move the commitment to outcome?
Yeah, sure, Esther. First and foremost, like I said, it's a great honor to be here and also talking about this very important topic. And I just want to call out huge congratulations to Desh, Vaishali, Shabnam, and the entire team from GCNI for their outstanding work in this topic of gender equality, but also around human rights, sustainability, labor and environment here in India. Now, to your question, Esther, I think as an industry, it's extremely reassuring that everybody has clearly laid out their plans when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and kind of having that as a core kind of a thought process when it comes to their people operations. And a lot of the organizations are making a lot of significant strides in this direction, right? And if you were to look at this conversation, say maybe like even 5 years ago, we probably wouldn't have been able to agree on that fact. So there's quite some significant progress being made. In fact, I can just reflect being from SAP, we were one of the first multinational tech company to be awarded the Global Gender Equality Certification from EDGE, which is the Economic Dividends for Gender Equality Organization. Or we were the top 25 best workplaces for women in India, just to give you a little bit of kind of what was achieved in terms of accolades. But the reason why this was possible is because as an organization, we're not asking our colleagues to change what makes them unique, but rather we embrace it as a culture, right? And we want our colleagues to know that they can bring their most authentic selves to the workplace, bring their best self to the workplace. And it's so important that as organizations, we create that culture every single day. And we also make very conscious efforts to make that environment so inclusive that empowers every single individual to rise with the organization, irrespective of their identities, irrespective of the backgrounds that they come from. And it's also important that also you have those role models, just reflecting on on SAP again, I mean, we have two executive board members who are women, right, who are clearly setting the tone right from the top. Now, if to your question on how are we kind of driving some of this into some of these commitments into concrete outcomes, right? For me, being a very strong proponent of using technology, I think we have to absolutely leverage technology to kind of deliver on some of the D&I policies. Now, let me explain with a little bit of examples, just how can we not just think of this as within your organization, but really using technology for kind of driving the change that we want to see beyond our organizations, in the societies, in the countries across the globe that we do business in. Because finally, if you ask me, when you have the data, data is what tells you the real story, right? And many times there are blind spots that if you have the better data, we can fill those blind spots because you have the facts at the table. And with those facts, you can have discussions around gender disparity, and otherwise you are kind of just making certain commitments and not having the data to prove as well, and many times it can be incorrect. So for example, if I take how we've leveraged technology to target inequity in the workplace, we're using technologies like artificial intelligence or even machine learning to kind of detect and eliminate bias at every decision point, from hiring to succession, because we've incorporated what we call as a job analyzer functionality into our core product, SAP SuccessFactors, which is, I mean, in very simple terms, supporting you in everything around human experience management, so all the way from recruiting your talent to compensation planning and so on. But within these very core people-oriented processes, there can be a lot of bias. And so you need to use technology to be able to craft those very effective, competitive job descriptions, but at the same time, eliminate unconscious bias that can happen in your recruiting. And that's how you change kind of some of the foundational aspects that you set up from a D&I policy. Or when it comes to pay transparency, again, how can we leverage technology to also make sure that the behavioral patterns that are common in large organizations like ours, where you have several hundreds, thousands of employees who need to be checked in terms of their compensation in order to also counter any kind of unconscious bias when it comes to compensation planning, again, leveraging machine learning to make that possible. Or if I look at supplier diversity reports, this is a core functionality that we've built into one of our largest business networks called the Reba network. Now, why did we do that? Because many times we make such statements like, hey, I want to work a lot more with women suppliers, or a certain percentage of my business, I will make sure that I work with women suppliers, just to make that as a call out when it comes to your commitment. But how do you make sure that you're going to track it? And again, leveraging technology. And by building in capabilities like supplier diversity reports, pretty much every organization in the world can very quickly track how they are using diverse suppliers to meet their diversity goals. Or things like accessibility of your core products. Because if you want to create a more inclusive environment, everyone must definitely feel equally empowered with their very individual capabilities. So we take accessibility in our core products extremely seriously and continuously strive to improve that in our core offerings. Or when we look at language, I mean, having inclusive language in the way we communicate things, it's also part of our commitment. So a lot of things. So as main takeaways, I'd say if you want to scale and kind of go across and beyond your organization, we have to leverage technology for that kind of scale.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sindhu, for not only sharing the practical examples of how do you really take that commitment into action, and you started with culture, and I'm going to come to Arundhati in a minute. You started with culture and leadership, but then you really started with everything that you do and how technology can help scale that commitment in everything that we do in the organization, not only HR, but beyond. So thank you so much for sharing that. So Arundhati, I would love to invite you now to share some of those barriers you've seen. I think you now, of course, represent a very high-tech organization, but you've also have experience on organizations that are a lot more, and while of course changing with digital transformation, but at different stages of maturity, right? what would be some of those barriers that you have seen, practical barriers that our listeners today, we have people from all over India, we have some leaders even from Portugal, they have come because they really are struggling with some of those barriers. In your view, what are those biggest barriers we have to break, and how do we break them? I think you're on mute. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah, now. Perfect.
Sorry. So for every crisis that mankind has faced, they have also come out with solutions. Okay. So there are two sides of the same coin. And the pandemic actually has really helped us in breaking certain barriers. And more so, these are barriers of perception than actual reality. So in 2015, I remember in my earlier institution, I was trying to set up a platform for work from home. And I was wanting to do this for women who could continue with their career, but who couldn't step out of their houses because, either they had an old parent to look after or a young child to look after, whatever. They had household help, but they needed supervision. And therefore, they were afraid of stepping out of the house. Now, when I tried this work from home platform, there was a lot of pushback, not only from the men, but also from the women. Because the idea was that if you allow people to work from home, they're going to slack off, their productivity is going to fall, they will be busy scanning the net, browsing on the net, or doing their WhatsApp or whatever it is. Okay. Now, that's one thing that I think this pandemic has put to rest quite comprehensively. That people can be just as productive and probably more productive when they are allowed to work from home, when there is a choice. Okay. So today, this work from home is no longer an option. It is something which I think most companies will adopt in some form or the other. Maybe not for the entire workforce, but definitely for parts of the workforce. So that actually empowers a lot of women, especially in India, where women continue to be the primary caregivers. It really empowers them a lot to continue with their careers. Again, I'm not saying that this is also an unalloyed gift. There are difficulties to it because obviously then the woman is sort of balancing between two responsibilities, and that's not easy. But then if you allow them to do it every once in a while when it's required, then it allows them not to fall off from the pipeline. And we've seen so much of that. The attrition as people, especially women, go up the ladder is pretty huge. Even in my earlier organization, we were getting in about 33% women at the entry level, but at the senior management level, that would reduce to 4%. So, this huge leaky pipeline is something I think, we now have a solution to it with the work from anywhere applications that we have. So that's one very big barrier gone, both mentally as well as technologically. Similarly, I think, the barrier that is also there amongst people, that you just can't find the right people. Okay, we've tried, we haven't found it. Now, I was at one of these WEF sessions, and the neighboring country, has been doing very well on this. And the Prime Minister there is a woman, as you know, she's a lady. And the Minister of HR also was a woman. And I asked her, that how is it that you managed to get so many women into higher positions? And she said, our Prime Minister has a very simple answer to this. Every list that is put up to her for very high level appointments must have a few diversity candidates. It must have. If we put it up to her without, she simply sends it back saying, find those candidates. If we tell her we can't find them, she says, that's your problem, that's not mine. Just find them. So, it's not that she's necessarily choosing only diversity candidates, but at least she's making sure that people have a say, have an opportunity. So I think, that's also something, that's a change of mindset. In Salesforce, for instance, the gentleman who used to look after equality, he's become the chief recruitment officer now. So he's now double hatting as the equality officer as well as the chief recruitment officer. So we really and truly need to live our values, to walk the talk. Because unless and until you do that, these barriers will continue.
Well, thank you so much, Arundhati. And you're already giving not only so many practical examples that are really available to us if that commitment is real. and giving examples on not only how some of those barriers are gone, and the important thing is how do we sustain it, and at the same time giving the examples on the hiding front. And we're going to come to you with a little more of those examples, but I'm going to take your point about the hiding input, and I'm going to go to Ashish now for some of those metrics. And Arundhati, you were sharing about diversity candidates as one metric. Like, do you actually have enough women in your hiring pipeline? Do you have enough women even in your review panels? So what are some of those metrics, Ashish, that we need to incorporate, which are lead indicators, not lag indicators? What would be your... So sorry, you're on mute. Yes.
Yeah. So good morning to everyone. I come from stock markets, so effectively we are like an aggregate, right? And the way I look at it is any management starts with measurement. If you cannot measure, you cannot manage. So your question is basically about setting up indicators, about how to measure an effectiveness or ineffectiveness of anything, and how to do it on a social scale. Effectively, BSE, which is pretty much the oldest stock exchange in Asia, but also the largest stock exchange in terms of number of stocks. We have almost 5,000 stocks listed. And if you take India's total economy, especially the formal economy, we account for almost large portion of all the employment and all. So how do we basically work on it to create those indicators? For example, there are many indicators in our lives which we use every day, like inflation is an indicator. The inflation you experience will be different from mine because your consumption may be different from mine. And similarly, the temperature is an indicator. You're sitting in a room which may have 25 degrees centigrade, and I am sitting in a room which may have 30 degrees centigrade. But outside temperature in Delhi or in Mumbai will be X, right? So that is also an indicator. Why I'm telling you this is, these are all indicators on aggregate of different types, but the experience which you have will be different. Why do you require this aggregate indicators is to benchmark yourselves. That am I higher as an organization? Am I lower as an organization? Where do I fit in? And more importantly, where do I want to go as a society, as well as in terms of individual organization or even as an individual? And if this organization or if this society is not supporting me, how do I change the organization, or how do I change the society, or how do I migrate out of this, right? And so those are the questions. If you have the measurement, you can do it. If you do not have measurement, it cannot be done. So stock markets specialize in creating those indexes, as we call them. So you have stock market index, but we have a green index. We have Sensex, which is what is now almost 50,000 plus. But we also have a green index, which tells which company is doing more green work than what it used to do earlier, or carbon neutral work. And so we can also have what I call gender index that can come out of the stock exchanges, which are part of the UN social social or SSE, as we call, sustainable exchange module. And so it's easy to create. What has happened is you can create many types of indexes, so many type of indicators, whether they are on participation of women, as I think Arundhati also said, Sindhu also said, how many women are participating in their company at the junior level, at middle level, at the higher level. Then on representative quality, first you start with quantity, then you go with quality, seeing how many CEOs are there, how many CFOs are there, how many C-level people are there, how many general managers are there. So you go a little more granular, and then you can actually also say you want to do a parity part of it. So you start working with the quantity and quality, and then how do you measure the quality part of it, whether they are getting the same salary for same work or not, whether they're getting similar work for the similar position or not. And so there are many things that can be done at the aggregate level, against which every organization can benchmark and then figure out whether they are in the right track or they need to change. And if they're not changing, what government needs to do? Because governments do govern, right? And the societies need to change with the changing times. So effectively, what happened is around 2000, onwards, the movement to bring women on board as a first layer of representation, because if they're on board, then they can also force the policies which help women to work in the organization well, and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of talks across the world. Even now, I participate in many international forums on policies for women, including at UN and elsewhere. And I realize that it's mere talks. Not many people actually want to do anything, or their politics do not allow it. But India took a very interesting sort of decision to force by law. India is pretty much the only large country in the world which has by law on all listed companies at least one woman director, and now one independent woman director. So effectively, it's not that you put a family member as a woman director, which is not bad at all. But over and above that, you need to get somebody who is not connected to you. And so I'm happy to share that 2014, we had around 60 to 70% boards out of top 1,000 companies had women directors. Now we have all companies having women directors except 8, which are actually suspended. And if they don't have women directors on their board and independent women directors on board, we actually charge them fines per day, which keep on gradually increasing per day. So it's not that you are non-compliant, but the monetary penalty is such that it's going to basically make it prohibitive for you to remain listed or do business in India. So Indian government in some ways is very, very progressive. Indian society is very progressive. Of course, our Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister was a woman, but effectively we have many role models in form of Madam Arundhati, whom we all look up to. We grew up listening to her as a leader, and we have also young leaders like Sindhu. And so I am very confident that we would be able to create some leading indicators to benchmark all your organizations going forward. But more importantly, the society is well prepared to sort of take these indicators, benchmark themselves, and improve where necessary.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashish. Thanks for giving that bigger picture on not only from country perspective, but also how do we make that potentially happen even in organizational, financial point of view. And I think everyone is appreciating your idea about this gender listing, and maybe that's something that definitely it's worth exploring forward. So thank you so much, Ashish. So we have another 12 to 14 minutes to go, and I've seen some questions coming from the audience. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite our panelists now to go a little deeper and say, okay, if you really look at the ecosystem, and I look at the ecosystem maybe like as a metaphor, let's look at it as a fish tank. And everyone has a fish tank. You either have a fish tank at home, or you have a fish tank in your organization, even in your own team. And inside that fish tank, we have our men and we have our women, and we also have the ecosystem, which is how do we swim in this fish tank. So Samir, I'm going to come to you with what is it that we need to do about helping men to make this ecosystem more inclusive. And I'm going to invite Sindhu to talk about the woman and what can we do to accelerate women careers. And Arundhati, I'm going to come to you and Ashish on what else we need to do to make more of those metrics that Ashish was talking about really move. And you're going to have to be really sharp. So it's going to be 2 minutes each. All right. So Samir, over to you.
Okay,
how do we get them in?
Rapid fire. So I'm going to start with the group. I think my late father prepared the group for a woman to take over. And that's very unusual in our family, where my mother is now the CEO, managing director of the group, which is one of the first in the Modi family. And that's the start of really putting in from a gender balanced organization of equal contribution by both genders. I play 2 roles. One, I lead an organization as a man, which is very women-centric, color cosmetic business. We have 60% women and 40% men. So they are the superior species in the group. I think men need to understand that women's role in workplaces, how important they are, how important they contribute, and therefore special training needs to be done to sensitize men about women-related issues. I think that enabling practices that make men feel included, for example, maternity leave for men, is something that organizations need to bring about. As far as the Modi group is concerned, have made a firm commitment of diversion and inclusivity. We have said that we need to have at least 55% women in the group. We are today in some companies 37, in some companies 42, in some companies we are about 75, and in some we are 5. So that needs to change. I think that thought leadership needs to play a very important role in sensitizing men, doing programs for men, getting men included into women-related issues at the workplace, to better formulate policies. A woman alone is not. It's like a woman fighting for women issues is like filling a bucket with a hole, and that too with a spoon.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Samir. And I love your point about gender neutral benefits. I think if we are able to open that gender neutralness in our benefits, then men can actually help the woman in their fish tank, which is the home fish tank, a little more. So thank you so much, Samir, for sharing that. Sindhu, what do we do with our woman segment?
Yeah, no, I really love what Samir was telling us, and you're right. It's not uncommon for working women to find themselves being pulled in multiple directions, right? Given all the roles and demands of each of the roles, be it in your personal as well as professional lives, I think it's definitely the onus should not just be on women to kind of bring their best versions, but it's also on organizations, policies. I loved what Ashish was telling us about how the government can also very clearly indicate with clear legislative policies in place to kind of get to the targets that we have. But as organizations as well, I mean, we all have a very important role to play in all of this. And I can just call some few examples, right? Like, for example, Back to Work program. It's a project-based program. Yes? Yeah. Right within your campus to just make it so much more easy and convenient for both men and women to take care of their children, or job sharing as an option, right? For management positions, we have job sharing where you have two part-time employees having the same management role, or flexible working hours. I think it's a wonderful option where we introduced that quite some time back, where men and women can plan their work according to their schedule. So a lot of these things, which I think we as an organization, we can put into place that kind of help accelerate and create that conducive environment for women at the workplace.
Thank you. Thanks, Sindhu. Arundhati and Ashish, I'm coming with the last question on how do we make the ecosystem more inclusive? What will be your word of advice, Arundhati? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. Yes, so one thing that I think is that, time is required for people to change perception. At the end of the day, all of these things start at the bottom, how children are treated, whether they are treated equally, whether they're given the same opportunities. And a very quick example, I used to work with a foundation called Agastya Foundation, who look after STEM education, how to improve that. And they take all of these experiments to schools that don't have science labs and actually do the experiments over there. So I went along with them to one of these municipality schools, quite a good school, lots of students, no science labs. And they were teaching these things in class. And, the girls over there were simply shooting up, in their seats in order to answer. What, however, struck me was that in a class of 35 students, there were only 7 boys. The rest were all girls. And I was wondering, since when has India's gender equation changed so much? So then I thought maybe it's an aberration. So I went into the next class, same story. So, after the class was over, I called over two of the kids and I asked them, do you have brothers? They said, yes. So I said, where do they study? In the private schools. So you see where the discrimination begins, that the boys are going to private schools that have better facilities. The girls are being sent to the municipal schools. However, even though I was very upset that night, I came back and then I sat down and I said that at least these girls are in school. 10 years back, they would be at home looking after their siblings and helping their mothers. So society has changed. And, this is the change that has to come. It has to come from the grassroots. Unless it happens from the grassroots, very difficult to change the ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Arundhati. I always love your optimism and the way that, even something that made you so upset and so sad, you said, okay, there is a silver lining everywhere. So thank you for sharing that story, Arundhati. Thank you so much. Ashish, we'd love to hear one or two more stories on how do we make the ecosystem more inclusive and how do we make that happen. I can see Shilpa coming. I'm just going to close in another 3 minutes with your permission, Shilpa.
So I would set a proposal here, and it's up to the UN and others to accept. And I can, from India, BSc can participate under the leadership of Madam Arundhati Bhattacharya. We can set up what I call inclusive index framework for all listed firms in the world, and sort of we can take leadership and sort of create that, and then UN Sustainable Stock Exchange framework can pass it on to all the governments to sort of look at them, come out with those numbers, and then they will themselves figure out how to manage that inequality, not only in gender, but in many other ways. Like as Madam Bhattacharya said, it's just that the people with money send their girls to schools, even if it is municipal. People without money, what happens to them, right? Their children, even the sort of the males don't go to school. And so how do we basically make life more inclusive, not only for women, but everyone and that's where I think if we can create that matrix, which comes out, which gets reported in the annual reports by law each year, each quarter, and that get measured by all the analysts, all the women, all the people across the world, they start getting discussed outside the boardrooms, in streets, in cafes, while working. And that's where I think when it goes up a little for society, it's a way to basically what I call jubilate, to celebrate. And that's what I would say, that if you can measure that, and we have a leader in form of Madam Bhattacharya, who has run pretty much one of the largest banks in the world. And I'm sure we will be benefited with her wisdom in creating this kind of matrices, which then everyone can implement.
That's a lovely idea, Ashish.
Thank you.
So that's what I call a panel that takes commitment to action. In just 40 minutes, not even 40 minutes, we've go into the topic. We've thought about a topic. Ashish has even suggested an idea, and we even have a leader who wants to take it forward. So I think this has been a fantastic panel. So thank you very much, Arundhati, Ashish, Samir, Sindhu. It's been a fantastic learning. Really, thank you from everyone who's in that session. Very, very warm thank you and gratitude.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Before you sign off, I just want to read one line for everybody.
Yeah, go ahead, Ashish. Oh, Samir, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I want just only one line which I shared earlier for everybody. Soch badlo, khud ko badlo, dunya badlo. And for all the men out there fighting for gender equality, socho mat badlo.
Wonderful.
True.
Thank you so much,
Very
Samir.
cool.
Over to you, Shilpa.
Yeah, thank you so much. Firstly, I would like to thank all you panelists and the moderator, because you know what I felt good about this particular session is all of you could see a silver lining behind any problem. So that was a very good thing. Thank you so much. And as Samir sir has rightly mentioned, कि सोच बदलो और सोच बदलेगी तो समाज भी बदलेगा. बहुत शुक्रिया आप लोगों का. And now we are going to join for this DGE CEO roundtable session now. So I would like to request you just go back to the reception, and then we are going to have the DGE CEO roundtable, and we'll be joining over there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.